for hosting this class. Being a title agent and being a partner for Julie's Realty, it's very important for myself as well as for Genesis and our entire organization to provide as much value and support as we can to the real estate team and the real estate community. So today we're going to talk about the title, the process of title and closing, because there are a lot of moving pieces, and I'm very happy to be doing this presentation with everyone here. Because there are so many moving pieces, it's important to understand what roles each person play in the real estate transaction. Any questions that you have, I will be monitoring the chat. So will Genesis. Please just put any questions on the chat that you might have on any slides. I'll be more than happy to answer them. I may just take a couple breaks here and there to go ahead and answer any questions that we may have or maybe on the screen. So first and foremost, my name is Maylene Montelongo. I am a licensed title agent with NuWorld Title. I have been with the NuWorld Title family now for 7 years, 6-7 years. And there's a lot that goes to say about that and why I've hung my license with NuWorld Title. And one of the main reasons is the support and the team, the culture. We are hands-on company, meaning that we want to help agents build their business and grow their business. So when you see or hear NuWorld, it's my job as a licensed title agent and a representative of NuWorld to put in that message out there that when you see that logo and you see that brand, you see a representation of teamwork, support, and togetherness, and just working together and getting the deals done. So I just wanted to pitch that a little bit in there, only because I think NuWorld Title is awesome. But digressing. So things we're going to talk about today are certain things that really are important into your transaction and into the process of your day-to-day. We're going to talk about setting expectations. We're going to talk about critical dates, which are super important, responsibilities, escrow and fees, the closing process, the funding process. And I always joke around when we talk about the wire process, I always say that that's usually the missing conversation, because in essence, it really is a missing conversation. So I'm going to give you some ideas and some tips and tricks on how to prepare your customers, your clients, your sellers, your buyers to what they can expect in today's world when doing a closing. But a lot of things have changed in the last several years. I've been doing this for quite some time, and it's nowhere near the same. It's nowhere near the same. I'm not even going to say how many years, just so I don't age myself. So first off, I start off this class with, what do we do as a title agent? What really is our role? And I'm going to put it into a small or an easy way to understand it. We represent the transaction. We don't only represent buyers. We don't only represent sellers. We represent everybody as a whole. Our main representation, the people we have to abide by their rules and their guidelines, is the title insurance underwriter. And that's important to know and important to understand. And here's why. When you're dealing with a title company is nothing other than an agency that's going to facilitate in your closing, that's going to order your reports, that's going to process your files, is going to prepare your documentations, and submit all of your recordings and all the documents to the county courthouse record. But when we order a title and we are processing a file, we are bounded by conditions and certain title clearing conditions from our title insurance underwriters. Some underwriters are more lenient, others are more conservative, and this is important to know. If you want it on the chat, you can give me a thumbs up, or you can just kind of raise your hand or give me a little emoji if you've experienced anything like this, where you're dealing with you have a contract with the title company, and all of a sudden the title company comes back and says, well, hey, I can't clear this title. We can't close this loan for whatever XYZ reason. It happens. And something that's important to know is that when a title company has more than 1 or 2 or even 3 title insurance underwriters, we have that leverage where we can say, all right, let's just put a name, Fidelity, you can't close this deal because you can't clear this issue. Well, guess what? I'm just going to take it from your hands and I'm going to put it into another underwriter, which may be North American Title, Stewart, First American. Those are just to name a few. These are things that happen on the back end of a title company that many agents don't know or don't realize. But again, we represent the transaction. We represent our underwriters. So I hope that kind of puts in a clear definition of what it is exactly that we do as a title agent. We don't just close your files. That's part of what we do. We close them, we clear them, we prepare them, but we also have guidelines that we have to adhere to, the same way lenders have guidelines that they have to follow when they're getting a loan for a buyer. So I hope that makes sense. I'm just gonna look on the chat real quick and make sure everybody's getting on there. I see we have 20 people now. All right. So my first step and my first suggestion in this whole process of closing is setting expectations. As real estate professionals, we have to do a better job, and I'm going to be very honest. We have to do a better job of setting the expectations for our consumers. And what do I mean by that? There are so many moving pieces in the closing puzzle. And if you're not ahead of the 8 ball, if you will, with your clients and pretty much guiding them for every step, they may just take an email the wrong way, or they may take a process the wrong way, or they may feel that you as their agent or their lender or their title company isn't doing their job by setting the expectation or letting them know ahead of time, hey, this may happen. So something that I always suggest for my clients, my agent clients, to do is just send a welcome email. We do it at NuWorld. We send a welcome email and we say, hey, this is your file number, this is your processor, this is, you know, the contact information in the email, and we have information sheets. We take it a step further and we provide a critical date sheet to the agents to let them know, hey, these are important critical dates that you have to keep in mind. As real estate professionals, we have to kind of walk through this process with our sellers and our buyers. Remember, this isn't their profession. It's kind of like saying, you want to do your taxes, right? I know zero about taxes. If I need to get my tax papers done correctly, I'm going to go to a tax accountant and I'm going to put all my faith and confidence on this tax accountant that they're going to do right by me and not do anything shady with the IRS. I don't want the IRS calling me for, hey, you filed this wrong or did that wrong. It's the same concept. We have to do a better job of setting the expectations with our clients and letting them know, hey, these are the next steps that you need to be looking out for. It only opens up that line of communication, which is a huge, huge thing that you want to do with your customers. The next step is, this is just a guide. This is how I train my agents and what they need to do within the first 24 hours. Let me just take a quick moment. I have a question on the chat. Is there a checklist? Yes, Marlene, there is a checklist in it, and we can send that over to you. So the first things you want to do within the first 24 hours of having a contract is send a copy of that executed contract to us right away. Don't wait. The moment that that last signature is signed, your contract date starts clicking. Everything, escrow deposits, inspections, appraisals, anything that's a contingent deadline on your contract starts ticking, including title evidence, meaning that we have to provide a title commitment and title report to the consumers at a certain time frame. So go ahead, get that contract initialed, submit it right away. Second thing you want to do is turn in escrow deposits. All right. Pet peeve number one. I get it. Everybody is busy. Everybody's just trying to get used to this whole new world. But I need everybody to also understand, we all have a responsibility and a due diligence. And what I mean by that is, we will help you, we will support you, we will do everything that we can within our means and within our reasons and within guidelines to help you. But if you are calling us on day 3 of your contract to ask, what are my wiring instructions? Where can I send in a deposit? And we have to issue an escrow letter that same day, you're giving us very minimal time to help you. So the moment you have that escrow deposit, that contract signed, we need everyone to work together and let these buyers know, listen, it is important that you either send me a check with the escrow deposit, with the escrow amount, submit the wire escrow to NuWorld Title, because we only have 3 days to do it. On the third day, mi gente, is not the time to call us and tell us, hey, I have an escrow deposit I need to send in. Today is day 3. Can you help me? I need an escrow letter. We will do what we can to help you. Granted, hands down, guaranteed. But I need you to understand that this is a team effort. Okay. I hope I made that very, very clear, because it happens more than I like more than I like to admit that it happens, but it happens. So the third thing is log down important contract deadlines. We have a critical date sheet that we can send over to you as a sample copy. What I always like to do is get this sheet and then put it in front of my file. I know some brokerages, I'm not sure if Judy's Realty has it. I think they do. I think you guys already have a checklist that you can kind of put in there, dates and whatnot. I know Broker Mint has that option. I know there's some CRMs. I'm not sure which one it is that Julie's Realty uses in particularly, but I know that there are some CRMs that if you put in the contract closing date, some of these dates will auto generate and auto populate for you. So it's important to really utilize anything that, or any tool or any system that will help you keep track of important contract deadlines. These are important for you as a real estate professional to keep track of. Order inspections, pet peeve number 2. This is a fun class. Pet peeve number 2, and this is coming from the title agent standpoint. Once we get a contract, and I think I can probably talk about, or I can probably speak for some title companies out there, maybe not all of them, but maybe just a handful. When we receive a contract, we're automatically ordering title, and we're automatically ordering a city lien letter at the beginning. We do not wait for appraisals to be done. We do not wait for inspections to be done. Why? These reports take time to get back to us. A title report, and Genesis, correct me if I'm wrong, can range anywhere between 3 to 7 days. We have been seeing them take 10 days at some point, at some time, depending on the county, the courthouse. Obviously, with the pandemic going on, they've been closed. So I'm sure that they're a little more delayed in sending these reports back to us. The city can take anywhere between 7 to 21 days to get back to us. So one of the reasons why we order these reports at the very beginning is so we can beat the clock. We can beat the closing deadline and have these reports on time. What does that have to do with ordering an inspection on time? When you order an inspection on time, there is a window, and usually inspections are due anywhere between the ranges of 5 to 14 days from what I've seen. That gives us time that if your buyer wants to back out of the contract, we can cancel our reports, meaning that we've ordered them, but they have not invoiced us yet. So that's huge. That's a huge thing to know. The second thing is that when you order the inspection report ahead of time, you have time to review the report calmly with time with your client and make sure that what their inspection report findings are, they are okay with it. Here's what happens when you do not order inspection reports the same day you get your executed contract. You wait, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I have to order the inspection report. It's due on Friday. Let me call an inspector. You're gonna have a hard time finding an inspector to do an inspection report for you in 24 hours. That's number 1. Number 2, if they do, they're gonna send it back to you, and you're only gonna have a short window of time to review all of the inspection report in detail. And guys, this has happened before where certain things on the inspection report have been missed due to not having the time to review it and the due diligence of that inspection report, that the buyers end up finding out after the fact, and then they want to negotiate it. Negotiating anything you find on your inspection report after the fact, yeah, not likely. It's going to turn your transaction haywire, because the listing agent is going to come back and say, hey, you had all this time to do it. I gave you 7 days. You should have read this in 7 days. Why are you telling me now that the buyer wants to do something with the panels 15, 20 days later before closing? There's a lot that can go awry if the inspection reports are not ordered on time. On the title end of it, it's important for us to know that we're going to move forward with this contract. We are going to move forward with anything that you need. And if there are any, guys, listen to this one. If there are any changes done or any credits, if you will, any addendums needed based on the inspection report, please send that to us. We need these addendums. We do not have a crystal ball. We're not going to come into closing and notice, oh my gosh, you know what? The seller and the buyer decided that they were going to give each other a credit of $800. It's missing on the HUD. It's missing on the HUD because we don't have it. We didn't receive that. So keep that in mind too. Any changes to the contract, any amendments that you're going to do on the contract, please send that to the title company so we can put it on our HUD. Verify HOA approval process. And I think this might be Genesis pet peeve number 1, my pet peeve number 3. Please, it is important. If there is a homeowners association, contact them or contact the listing agent and start finding out what the borrower has to do to get approval from the HOA. At the estoppel phase is not time to find out. A week or 2 days before closing is not the time to run and get an approval process. Here's what happens if we do not have an HOA approval in our hands at the time of closing. We can have a clear title. We can have a clear report. We can have the lender's package. We can have the money. We can be ready to close. But if our estoppel letter and our guidelines say that their buyer needs to be approved by the homeowners association, we cannot facilitate the closing because we do not know if the homeowners association will allow this borrower to live in this property. So it's important that this process is done way ahead of time. Not only that, homeowners associations can very well take up to 30 days to give you an HOA approval. So it's very important you start verifying the HOA approval process. And then lastly, obviously verify the title and city lien search reports are ordered right away. As I mentioned before, NuWorld Title has a standard procedure that we order the title and the city lien searches the day we receive the contracts. If you're not working with NuWorld Title, chances are there are some title companies out there that do not order city and title lien searches right away. They may wait for appraisal, they may wait for inspection, but keep the timeline in mind so that you kind of know where you're going with in your transaction. Let me look here because I see that there's some chats on there. Don't we need to check the HOA rules and regulations before we order the inspections? You can do that all at the same time. HOA rules is one thing, inspection is another. HOA rules and bylines are basically nothing more than a guideline and a cheat sheet, if you will, of what the HOA will allow and accept. Something that you may see, and two things that you may see from an HOA is, one, do they allow pets or do they not allow pets? That has nothing to do with inspection. That just has to do with the regulations of the association. Do they allow commercial vehicles? They may not. Has nothing to do with inspection. Deed restrictions. Will they allow a homeowner or a new borrower to rent the property automatically, or do they require that the homeowner stay in the property or live as a primary residence for a certain amount of time? Has nothing to do with inspection. Inspection has everything to do with the condition, the current condition of the home. Is there mold? What's their plumbing like? Do they have roof leaks? How are the electrical panels? So you can, in essence, you can do both all at the same time. You can verify the HOA rules and regulations, make sure that the borrower can abide by them, and 2, order the inspection. So those are 2 things you can very well do at the same time. I would like the buyer know all these details before they invest money for inspections. You can very well do that. The moment that you get into contract, you can contact the listing agent, or you can just go ahead and even before you go into contracts, contact the listing agent, and they should have already the condo bylaws in their hands. That's something, at least for me, in my personal opinion, if you are a listing agent representing a seller within a homeowners association or within a condo, something you should already be asking your seller is for a copy of the HOA documents and guidelines. In essence, there is 3 days from the executed contract that the listing agent or the seller needs to provide this to the buyer. If it's a resale, if it's a new development, I think it's like 5 to 10 days, but I think Julie can go ahead and reference into that. So if that's something you would like to do, ask on it, right before you even get into contract, just to see if it makes sense for them to purchase that property. So let's go moving on to certain things you need to discuss ahead of time with your clients. And if you want, you could take a screenshot of the screen. I will be more than happy to share this presentation with you. These are just bullet points that we, as a title company, that we suggest, because these are certain things that we see where they can be pitfalls, or sometimes I like to call, common ways that a deal can go sour, or just, your common contract pitfalls in general. But again, this is on the title side, this is on the closing side. And the purpose of this training is to teach you how to ease certain steps of the closing process. So the first things first, terms of contracts. I remember way back when, and I'm not even going to say how long ago, we'll just leave it at that my mom used to be a broker for a Century 21 franchise. I was in high school, and she would, till her face turned blue, go over every paragraph, every important section of this contract with her agents. And I remember vividly being in her office and telling them, you need to go over these terms. You need to go over these terms. And it makes sense as I got older and I started, learning more about the contracts and seeing certain things happening, as I was processing files, I got it. I'm like, wow, it makes sense. A lot of what's on that contract is you're sending these to consumers. You're sending them 12 pages to these consumers. They are excited. They are putting their money, their investment in your hands. If you think that they're going to read these 12 pages, they're not going to do that. In a perfect world, they would. It is our job to make sure that we are securing their money and their investment. So what I'm basically saying is, instead of just drafting up the contract and sending it via .loop or app files or green sheets or however it is that you send it, and saying, hey, here's your contract, initial on all the bottom pages and sign on the last one, take the time to get on the phone with them and say, before you sign, let's do a Zoom call or let's have a conversation. There are certain parts of this contract I want us to go over and make sure you understand. Especially the newer contracts where now they go into the financing and due diligence of the buyer. It's important that they know what these terms are, especially when they think that they're slick and they think that they know it all and they think that they can just back out of a deal and get their deposit back. It doesn't work that way. The contract protects the buyer as well as it protects the seller. So it's our job to make sure that they understand these terms. And you don't have to go line by line, just go over certain important parts of the contract that they need to understand and need to know. Hey, if you don't do this, you're in breach of contract. You may lose your deposit. Just want to let you know, FYI, okay? The second thing you want to do, and I go back to it, is critical dates. Just make sure that they understand there are things that the borrowers need to do. They have to be responsible for turning in their escrow deposit. They have to be responsible for reviewing the inspection report. You're there to guide them. They have to be responsible for making sure that they make loan application. There's a lot of things they need to do too that they need to be aware of. If you're not telling them this and you're not guiding them, it's going to be a disaster. Truthfully, they're going to be like, well, my agent didn't tell me that. Well, I didn't know I had to turn in an escrow deposit, or I didn't know I had to do this by this time. You don't want to get into that mess. Responsibilities, such as inspection reports, HOAs. We talked about this already in the previous slide. Escrow deposits, turn them in a timely manner. Wire is preferred. Truthfully, with what we're dealing with today, in the pandemic and in COVID, sending them wire is the most preferred way. It's probably one of the most secure ways too. We can source the monies right away. So something that you might want to do is, when you send in your contract to NuWorld Title and the borrower is going to send a wire, have them send us a copy of the wire confirmation so we can source those funds quicker. That way, our girls don't have to be looking through the bank account and seeing, okay, where is well, there is the wire. It just makes it easier and quicker for us to issue an escrow deposit. Talk to them about the loan process. This is where you and your mortgage professional need to meet eye to eye and have conversations and communications and guide the buyer through the loan process, steps that they need to make. Closing fees. This is another big topic, especially when it comes to closing fees and getting ready for closings. Most lenders will already issue a loan estimate to the borrower. We will issue a preliminary HUD to the borrower and to you with our estimated closing fees. Make sure that they understand what these closing fees are. I will tell you, sometimes during the beginning phases, the fees are a little higher, because most lenders might want to put a cushion on the fees to make sure that they account for everything that's needed. So they may actually be lower at the time of closing, but they need to understand that certain fees can be adjusted, they can be negotiated, but they need to do that during the beginning phases, not when the loan is already done and then they're 3 days before closing and they're like, well, wait a minute, what's this whole origination fee about? I don't want to pay for that. That's something they should have done ahead of time, and it's something that the loan officer may have disclosed to them at that time as well. Clearing title, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide. There is a process for that. Remember, our job is representing the transaction. Our job is to issue a clear marketable title. Sometimes titles come in clear and we have no issues, none whatsoever. But then there's other times where there's what I like to say, arroz con mango. I mean, if you're Cuban and you're Latin, you would probably know what that means. It's just rice with mangoes, and it's not a combination that anybody wants to eat anyways. It's just a big cluster. So sometimes it's like that, sometimes it's not. HOA approval application, have that conversation with them. As you notice, there's a lot of things that are repeated here, and it's because I really want to make sure that these points are sinking in so that you realize how important they really are in the process of closing your transaction. Then we're going to talk about the closing process itself, and then obviously the funding process. Now, you can take this entire checklist, create one on your own, and as you start going through each phase of the closing process, just check it off and just say, all right, we talked about critical date sheets. You know what? Let's talk about the loan process. After you have the conversation, all right, you know what? Let's have a conversation about closing fees. Here, we're now in the clearing title process. Let's have a conversation about here, all the way down till you get to the funding process. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that these little tips that we're sharing will help and help you when you have your next contract. Let me see if we have here. Okay, we have something from Genesis. Okay, when the loan estimate and closing fees, when would the loan estimates and closing fees should be provided? Usually upon the request. Loan estimates are provided by the lender, correct? Normally a pre-CD is already given to the lender. That's correct also. Thank you, Marlene, super. What's up? All right, let's talk a little bit about escrows, because there's a lot of information on here that I know sometimes when I say this part, they're like, I didn't know that, really? So must be turned in by contract deadlines. I think this is the third time I say it, it's sinking in. Escrow letters can be issued. All right, guys, you ready for this one? Essentially, escrow letters can be issued within 10 days. Now, here's how escrow deposits work. So you have a general idea of why I put this on here, okay? Although the contract says that the escrow deposit has to be made in 3 days, an escrow letter can take up to 10 days. Now, if you are giving us a check, right, and we're depositing this check is not going to be cleared in our bank account within minutes. It's not like a wire. That's why we always say, listen, wire is more preferable, because you initiate the wire, the money's in our accounts. I want you guys to do a little study, a little research for me, if you can, and compare escrow letters. Compare an escrow letter you get with a wire and compare an escrow letter you get with a check. And you're going to notice that there's a very specific verbiage that's completely different. If we have a wire that's been sent into our office, that escrow letter is going to say funds have been cleared. If we have a check that comes into our office, that escrow letter is going to say funds pending to clear. Why? Because the bank has a process of 7 to 10 days to clear checks and make sure that those checks are not bounced, that those checks are cleared, and that money is in our account. Essentially, we can issue another escrow letter that says the funds have been cleared. But I want you guys to realize that, and I want you guys to notice the difference, because you may come across a certain lender in their guidelines where they'll say, well, I need an escrow letter. And you're going to say like, well, I already sent you an escrow letter. They're like, yeah, but I need the escrow letter to say cleared. The first reaction you're going to have, hands down, because it always happens, oh my gosh, the title company didn't send me the right escrow letter. Why would they not do that? Listen, it's not that we didn't send you the right escrow letter. We sent you the right escrow letter. The difference is how that escrow deposit was sent to us. Was it sent to us via wire? Was it sent to us via check? So there's a big difference when you're seeing the escrow letter. So I want everybody to keep that in mind and explain this process to the buyers, because some of them may be very hesitant in issuing a wire deposit, a wire check. So this is a good point to give to them when you're talking to them. The contract will govern all allowable closing fees. On section 9, paragraph 9 of the contract, there is a breakdown, and it will say buyers buyers closing cost pays, seller closing cost pays. We cannot, as a title company, digress from that section. We have to follow the fees on the contract. So if your customer, your client wants to know a little bit more about fees, you can always redirect it back to that contract. And if they have questions, well, why am I paying for this? Just say, well, the reason why you're paying for that is because it's a part of the contract, and this is why the title company may have put that there. So I hope that makes complete sense, that you do have the contract there that you can revert back to when you get preliminary HUDs and your customers are saying, well, why am I paying for that? Now you know where you can pretty much guide them and say, well, it's on the contract. I can't really digress from it. But just so you know, a title company cannot digress from anything that's on the contract. Lenders will issue a loan estimate, usually which will include lender, loan, and closing fees. So let me check the chat here. Okay, there's nothing there. So clearing title. So this process is a little tedious sometimes, depending on what we get on our title. And it's nothing more than just getting the reports, going over them, and seeing what we have to deal with. Now, I will tell you this. There are 2 reports we order, and they're on 2 different systems. But the one main report that the title company has to abide by, meaning that it has to be completely cleared, nothing can be pending on this report, is our title report. So think of it this way. Title insurance policy, a clear title report. What does that mean? That means that if we have a city report and it shows me some open permits, or it shows me some citations, in essence, we're going to provide this information to you and to your consumers. They can go ahead and either negotiate for the seller to fix this, to pay it, to clear it before the closing, or they can say, well, you know what? We really want the house. The title is clear. We're going to get a title insurance policy. It's just an open permit that we need to go with the city. You know what? We'll sign a hold harmless agreement and close. So I need everybody to understand the difference between the 2 of the reports, and we're going to go into that on the next screen. So the first report, which is the title report, this is coming directly from the county courthouse system. It is done through a title examiner, right? And it's going to lay out, it's going to give me a form that just says, hey, May, there are these mortgages, these many mortgages on title. There's a claim of lien, there's a notice of lis pendens, or nothing. It's just going to say, hey, there's nothing recorded against the county records. The property is clear. In addition to what it's showing me on the county courthouse, it's going to tell me what our underwriters, what our title insurance underwriters are going to require to issue this title insurance policy. I want you to think of this as a loan commitment from a lender. When a lender issues a loan commitment from their underwriter, it is nothing more than a list that loan officer or that mortgage broker has to follow and has to provide to the underwriter in order for the underwriter to issue the loan. It may have things like a 4506T, a verification of employment, bank statements, proof of income, taxes, whatever the case may be. I want you to take that same concept and now put it into title. The same exact thing happens. The only difference is our underwriters are going to give us guidelines that are going to tell us, hey, NuWorld Title, I need you to clear this information. I need verification of this information. I need continuous marriage affidavits. I need all of this in order for us to issue a title insurance policy. Does that make sense? I'm going to stop here right now and take on any questions. Does that make sense? Because I know sometimes when it comes to title companies, it's like, well, what is on that report? Why is it on there? Okay, and another thing I want to say about title reports is this. I don't know how many of you are working with investors. I'm sorry, I'm chewing gum. I like all over the place. I don't know how many of you are working with investors, but one of the requests that we get a lot is, hey, can you do a quick title search on a property for an investor? They want to buy an auction property, whatever the case is. The answer is yes, we can definitely do that. We have no problem doing that. The difference between ordering a pencil search and a title search is the pencil search is only going to show me, or it's only going to show you what's recorded in public records. It is not going to show you if there are any underwriting conditions that the underwriter will call for in order to clear title and issue a title insurance policy. You're thinking, well, what can some of those conditions possibly be? A corrective warranty deed. What that means is there was a deed previously recorded that was recorded incorrectly, and now they're asking us to correct it. A probate. Maybe there was a death of a family owner in that property, and maybe that's not recorded in public records, but it's listed that there's a death certificate somewhere in the system. So our underwriters may say, well, you know what? We need a probate or a summary of administration in order to clear the title. Those are just two examples and two examples or two scenarios that you can see that would be an underwriting condition and not a title condition. So keep that in mind. If you are working with investors, there is a difference between just ordering a title search or a pencil search just to see what's recorded, and then a full commitment, which is what we get at closing. So there may be times where, you know, Genesis or Katrina or anyone in our office may say, hey, listen, you know, title, we don't have anything to order on title, like there's no payoff or nothing, but listen, we got to order a corrective deed. It's an underwriting condition. These are what our underwriters are asking us for. This is when it makes a difference if you have one title insurance underwriter or four, because depending on what the title insurance underwriter is asking for, if it's very conservative, we may just say, hey, you know what, we're going to take this to Fidelity or Stewart or First American and see if they can give us another option to clear this condition easier and quicker so we can get the file to closing. That's when having more than one underwriter really makes a difference when working with the title company, and it just depends on the guidelines. Real quick, there is a second update that we do 24 hours before closing. And this is just to cover the gap search of the property, of the title. So in essence, what that means is we'll order title today, but we're closing in 30 days. There's a window of 30 days where the county can go ahead and record anything. I mean, a seller can go ahead and get out a second equity line of credit if they wanted to try to be slick. Listen, it's happened before. It's happened to my mom and I when we had our title company. That was a very scary moment. Thank God we ordered a title update 24 hours prior to closing, and we were able to catch it. They had to pay for it. The sellers were not very happy. They thought they were going to get away with it. No, you're not going to get away with it. So it's important to know that, yes, certain issues or certain new filings can come up on records 24 hours prior to the closing. Please don't think that it's the title company that didn't do their job, or, you know, why is the title company telling me this right now? It has nothing to do with the title company. It has everything to do with the title company doing their job and making sure that the city did not cover, or the county did not add anything else into public records within that gap time, within those 30 days. So I hope that makes sense. I have a question. How long the whole process from contract to closing should take if everything works in a promptly manner? So my answer to you would be, as long as title is clear and city are clear, you can probably close a deal in 14 days if it's cash. If there's financing, you have to take into consideration the time of financing that it's going to take for the lender, so that it's case by case scenario that you would be able to figure it out. All right, so let's go on to the city lien report real quick. it's going to show unrecorded liens such as code violations, and I'll get back to that in a second. It's going to show us open tax bill, tax deeds, water bills, anything unpaid. It's usually done by a third-party vendor. They can take up to 21 to 25 days. It is separate from a title search completely. A title search is county, city search is city. It is for the buyer's protection. And the reason why I say that is there was a time way back when, and I really don't foresee us going into this, but you might want to just kind of keep it in the back burner, that if you are dealing with a foreclosure, meaning that you're purchasing an REO property, chances are that that bank has already hired an attorney or a title company to do their closing. They may or may not order a city lien search. And again, it goes back to the only document that the title company is bounded by to issue a clear title and issue a title insurance policy is the title commitment. Some REO banks are starting to get, and I started seeing that a little bit more in the past, where they're like, okay, we're going to order a city lien search, we're going to order it. If you see for any reason that there is not a charge for a city lien search on a HUD, you need to let the buyer know right away, and you need to let the title company know right away, because it is for the buyer's protection. You do want them to know, hey, there are any possible code violations, there's citations that can become a lien later on. There are some open permits. There was a tiki hut that may have issues. You just want to make sure that that city lien search is always ordered, whether you're dealing with a short sale, a regular deal, or a foreclosure. So I hope that makes sense. And lastly, open permits are not covered by title insurance. Sorry, guys. It has to be a recorded document, meaning that it has to be physically recorded in county courthouse records, in the courthouse, in our title commitment for it to be a lien. Going back to code violations. I don't know if any of you have had issues with this, but I'm going to take my favorite place in the whole wide world because I'm actually from there, in Hialeah, la ciudad que progresa, and there's always things going on in Hialeah. It's pretty interesting what you find there, but digressing. Let's take the city of Hialeah, for instance, and they may have done some work to the house, whatever the case may be. And maybe they did it correctly. There's some properties that they do it correctly, some properties that they don't. The city may come in and, put in a citation and saying, hey, you know what, you have a citation for not cutting your grass is too high, or you have your garbage outside, in your front house for too long, or you have a broken down vehicle in your house, or, you have a vehicle that has, an expired tag. It's going to start with a citation, right? It's going to start with a notice. If that notice is not taken care of within the time frame that the city gives it to you, they then start making it into a lien, a notice of lien. And then it becomes a code violation. And a code violation, believe it or not, can appear on a city lien search as not recorded and not appear on a title search. The city has to take this code violation, this notice, the whole filing, and they have to file it in the county courthouse records in order for it to appear on your title report. If they do not do that process, and there are some cities that they do not do that, why? Because it's a cost, and they have to pay for filing fees. They just leave it on the city report. They just leave it on the city system. At some point in time, they can very well grab those documents and say, you know what, we need to get paid. Let's just take this and put it in, let's record it and put it in the county courthouse. And now all of a sudden you have a lien, a code violation lien on your property against your title. So that's important to know the difference between the two reports. And yes, you can find unrecorded liens on the city report depending on how the city handles it. Any questions? Let's see. What if the loan is pre-approved? The loan can be pre-approved, but you still have to go through underwriting. Pre-approval is nothing more than saying, hey, you've been pre-qualified and you've been pre-approved to purchase a new property. That lender still has to take that loan, those documents, and submit it to underwriting, get the loan commitment, and get everything done for financing. So pre-approval is nothing more than just saying, hey, you've been qualified for a home. You still have to go through the time frame of their process, their underwriting process to clear the file for closing. Which brings me to this next slide. That was awesome. Everything just like kind of flowed. So the roadmap to the closing table. Real quick, this is just a quick guide that I wanted to share with everyone on what you can expect during the closing process. You can print this, you can take this, you can put it part of your package if you like. You can make it part of your checklist, anything that you want to do with it. So the first things first, and Genesis is on here, so Genesis can chime in at any time. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself, mute yourself, however you want to do it. I'm trying to find you. There you are.
I'm unmuted and I'm listening. I'll chime in if you have any questions.
Awesome. Right. So the first thing is once we get that clear to close notice from the lender, that basically is our cue to say, all right, they're getting ready to close. Let's get our file. Let's get our numbers ready. Let's make sure we have everything in place so that we can move forward to the closing. Typically, by the time we have a clear to close notice, our part is already done, meaning that we've already determined whether we have a clear title or not. If we do not have a clear title, we've already been able to clear whatever conditions are on there. Obviously, if there's a title condition that takes more time to clear, that's something we would have communicated with everybody, including the lender, and saying, hey, we need more time because we have this issue. Typically, when the clear to close notice comes in, it's because we're ready to get this party started and getting ready to close. What'll happen is, the first thing that'll happen is the lender will send over a 3-day rule. It's called the 3-day rule. They will send over and I like to call this pre-final closing disclosure to the borrower 3 days before closing. This is an important step. This is the step that basically indicates these are your estimated closing figures. This is your estimated cash to close. Any figures you see here, any fees you see here that you are not comfortable with or that you may have a question about, now is the time to inquire. Once they sign off that they have acknowledged the fees and they have accepted the fees, it'll trigger the lender to say, okay, they've accepted the fees, everything is good to go, there's going to be no changes in fees, we're moving on. We're moving on to project this file to close in 3 days. So it's important. Now, agents, I love you all very, very dearly, but I know that you guys have processing fees too. I need you to please, we all need you to work together with us. And if for any reason you do not see your processing fee on the closing disclosure, you need to let us know right away. Not at the time of closing, not after closing. There are 2 in particular places that I always suggest for agents to put their processing fee. Number 1, on your additional disclosures of your contract. Second place, paragraph 9, where it says closing costs paid by buyer, closing costs paid by seller. There's going to be a little section that says other with a line. Put it right there. That way, the lenders know that there is an additional fee that they need to allocate on their end when they're doing their closing figures. And then it triggers us to know that we have to put it on our end when we're doing closing figures. Notice what I said there, that the lender will see it. The lender sees the contract. They go by the fees on the contract as well. If you do not call us or you do not review your closing disclosure, it's said and done. To change it is going to require that the whole 3 days is done over again. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to waste 3 days, or you don't want to delay your closing 3 days because you didn't have time to review it or whatever the case is. So please review these closing disclosures once you get them from either the title company or your borrower gets them from the lender. So once the 3 days are done, we now go into the closing instructions released. That is nothing more than the lender saying, all right, title company, here's our closing figures, right? We have to balance with what we have in our bank account and what the lender sent out. So what does that mean? We're going to be receiving wires into our bank account, right? And we're going to have a final number on our end. The lender is sending out the borrower a pre-final closing disclosure 3 days before the closing. We have to get that closing disclosure. We have to get our closing disclosure, and we have to match them. Meaning that we have to make sure that what the lender is allocating as closing costs matches what we have in our bank account. This is where you hear the word balance. We balance, our CDs balance, we don't balance. You want to hear a cue word that says we balance. What that means is that we have the appropriate money in our bank account that matches what the lender is sending out to the borrower, and the cash to close match. I just want to just share with you that process that we have to do in our side, because until we are balanced with the lender, guess what we're not able to do? The closing. And some lenders, it depends on who they are, some lenders will not release a closing package unless that they have the balancing between the title company and their numbers. So depending on the lender, they may just say, all right, here are your closing figures and here your package, schedule the closing once we balance. Or they may come and say, hey, you know what? We're just going to send you the closing figures, but we're not going to send you the package or the money until we balance, because we need to know how much money we need to wire you exactly. So it's important to understand and know this process and have this conversation with the buyers, because once they get that email on the second phase where it says 3 days, once they get that email in their mind, they're like, oh my God, we're closing in 3 days. When are we closing? Can we go tomorrow? By the way, they cannot close prior to that, because they may call you and say, hey, can I close tomorrow? No, they got to wait the 3 days. That's part of the CFPB guidelines. They have to wait till the 3rd day. Once the final CD is approved, once we balance, that's when the closing is confirmed. We need to, what does CTC stand for? Clear to close notice. That's what it stands for. So once we have the closing package in our hands, which is another thing I need to elaborate, and I know Genesis can elaborate on this one too. Once we have the closing package in our hands, we can conduct the closing. Like I mentioned before, some lenders will give us the closing instructions and the closing figures at the same time. Others want to have the balance, the CD balance, before they give us the closing package. It could be day 3. It could very well be day 3, and the lender has not released the closing package. This is part 1 of the missing conversation that I mentioned earlier. This is something that the borrowers need to understand and they need to know of, and it's communication. We can go ahead and be ready to go. We can tentatively schedule a closing to be projected at the certain time and a certain date. But we will confirm it once the closing package is physically in our hands, meaning the lenders released the closing package and they gave it to us. We also have to understand that some of these lenders are not from here. They're not local. They're in California, they're in Texas, so their time difference is not on our time, it's not on our time zone. So we have to also keep that into consideration. Any questions regarding the closing process while we're still here? Look here. Do you need to see the appraisal report at some point? Yes, sometimes the appraisal is helpful to expedite the survey. Typically the appraisal is more for on the lender side, but it does help us when we want to do the survey. Okay, let's go on to the funding process and guideline. All right, this one is a total missing conversation that we're going to teach you and we're going to guide you on what to expect and why this is the way that it is. And you're going to see this around every title company. There is no title company that does this step any differently, because this is just the way that it works. This is the funding process. And the reason why I want to elaborate on this a little bit more is because times are changing and times have changed. I remember doing closings where I can have the key in my hand and the borrower can be sitting in front of me and they can give me a cashier's check and I can give them the keys at the table. call it a day, closing done, congratulations, you're a new homeowner. Those days are no more like that. I get it. Everybody wants to close, everybody wants their keys. But we also have to understand the world that we're living in today. And there's certain steps here that I'm going to talk about that we also have to kind of really keep in mind of what this process is like. Is it possible to get keys the same day? Absolutely. It is very possible to get keys the same day. Is it also very possible to get keys the second day? Very possible too. Timing and expectations and understanding this process is everything. So the first thing is, the step number one is the funding process will take place once all documents have been signed and delivered to the closing agent. What does this mean? Right now we're doing mobile closings because unfortunately the pandemic and COVID have put us in this situation. If we schedule a closing to happen either in your office or in the consumer's home, maybe they don't want to come to our office. We want to have them sign in a place where they feel comfortable and at ease. We are now sending a mobile closer to this distant location outside of our office, any given time of the day. They will go, they will sign the closing documents with the consumer, or they will sign the closing documents with the seller. They have to then send these documents back to us. We have to take into account that is travel time. In some instances, we would prefer have them doing them at the agent's office because there is a scanner. We can have them pre-attempt and scan it. There's certain steps that we can do and work with the mobile closers to speed up the process. But in essence, we need to have these closing documents back in our hands once the file is closed, because it goes on to step number two. If your deal is financing, once we have these documents, most, if not all lenders are going to ask us, well, we need you to send us the package, scan it and send it to us back for us to review. You are not authorized to fund. You are not authorized to release our money that we have given and deposited into your account so the buyer can purchase this home until we give you approval. That process is called funding approval. This process between 1 and 2 needs to be explained to the borrowers when they're signing at the closing table, saying, listen, congratulations, you're signing your documents. This is an exciting moment. We still have 2 more steps before we can call this place your home and issue your keys. The title company now has to take this package back to the lender for them to approve it and approve the funds to be dispersed. Does that make sense? I'm going to take questions on this now because I know that this is one of the areas that everybody is always like, I don't understand. Why is funding taking so long? I had someone ask me the other day, is it possible for funding to happen next day? Yes, it's very possible for funding to happen next day. So any questions regarding this process, please shoot them out. Genesis, is there anything you want to elaborate on this process? Because I know this is something that's a huge topic for us and a huge expectation.
I mean, honestly, Maylene, I think you covered it all. The fact that if everybody understands, and like you said, it's a matter of communication and it's a matter of understanding everything that goes behind the funding process, which is not just the funding authorization, but it's also getting wires from the lenders. It's a little bit of everything that can make or break it. When it's a later closing, then you're really kind of risking the fact that it might be, you got to kind of keep in mind that it may be the next day funding, only because there's cutoffs and all of that. So as long as, like you said, you set the expectation and it's communicated across the board and it's not over-promised, because it's a lot of factors. As much as we want to fund right away, there's certain things that may impede us from being able to do so. So the later the closing, the more of a possibility of it rolling over to the next day, only because of all the factors that come with the funding process.
Correct. And also keep in mind, which brings me down to my third point, which is wire transfer cutoff times. And that's also and that's also a missed conversation. It's presumed that, all right, we sent in a wire, and the wire is going to come in 24 hours or like in 24 minutes. It's a wire. It should come in fast. Truth of the matter is this. Banks have wire cutoff times, meaning that we can send out a wire at 5 o'clock in the evening, but the seller's bank has their wire cutoff time at 12 o'clock. So if we send a wire at 5, will the seller see the dollar signs in their bank account at 5:01? Chances are they won't, because their receiving bank has a wire cutoff time until 12. That means that on the seller's bank account, it'll show as pending, it'll show as money coming in, but it won't show as posted, meaning it won't show as deposited until the following day. That's why timing is important. The earlier that we get the package from the lender, the sooner we can close, the sooner we can get the package back, the sooner we can do the funding approval, and the sooner we can fund. The later on the day, as the time goes by, the later the day goes, and the longer it takes to get a package or to get the mobile notary out there, the longer it's going to be that, or more likely that it's going to be that the file won't be funding to the next day. So if you want to kind of give it a rule of thumb, anything that closes after 12 noon is a very big possibility that'll fund the next day. Anything that closes between the hours of 9 to 12, in 9 in the morning till 12 in the noon, it's a very big possibility it's going to fund that same day. Granted and given that the lender has given us the closing package early on in the morning or the day before. So those are 3 very important guidelines and processes that we need to start doing a better job and explaining this process, not only so much to the sellers, but also so much to the buyers, because this is an exciting moment for them. Like in their minds, they're like, I'm coming in, I'm signing, I've closed, where are my keys? Well, we still have 3 other steps that we need to take before we can go ahead and issue your keys, okay? Any questions on this?
May,
Yeah.
can you also chime in a little bit on OFAC and how it's very possible on common names, which can also delay on the funding as well?
Yes, and that is a very good point. So there is a process that's in the bank, and we do a pretty good job at trying to foresee this OFAC report. So an OFAC report is nothing more than a report that's coming in from the federal insurance, right? FDIC, I think it is, where they have a list of names, common names, and they're going to put on there, wanted criminals or wanted by the FBI or, any name that has red flags into the system. If there is a name that has red flags into the system, I'll do even better. I'm going to share a story that happened to me personally on one of my files at a previous title company that I had worked with. This is years ago. This is when OFAC started becoming a part into the title process, where title companies should be ordering an OFAC report. So we order one. Again, we try to be proactive with it. So there was a deal that I had. We put it to closing, and 7 days later, I'm getting a call from my agent, and she's like, "Hey, listen, I just got a call from my sellers, freaking out, because it's been 7 days and they don't have the money from the closing in their bank account." I'm like, oh my gosh. The first thing I thought, truth be told, oh my gosh, we inputted the wrong bank account information. Que pena. We're gonna have to figure this out. So I immediately called my funder at the time, and I said, "Hey, listen, I got this call. Can you please look into this file? They're saying that the seller hasn't gotten their money, and it's been 7 days. She's freaking out. She's super upset. She wants to file a claim." On and on and on. We go into the bank account, and my funder verified it. She's like, "Nope, the number and everything is exactly the same as they signed off on it, as they provided to us." We're like, "All right, well, let's call Bank of America and see what's going on." So we go and call Bank of America, and it just so happens that the buyer, this in particular buyer, his name came up on the OFAC report. And his name was the same exact name as a wanted person in Cuba. So because his name was the same name, the bank, has nothing to do with the title company, the bank froze the transfer. They basically said, hold on, time out. We need to verify this person and make sure that this person is not one and the same so that we can transfer the funds. And that's what Genesis means in regards to the OFAC. So can it happen? Absolutely. Is it something that happens often? No. Does the bank notify a title company of this? No. How do you find out about it? Getting a phone call from your seller saying, I haven't gotten my money. What is going on? So it is very possible that this can happen. Again, NuWorld Title, we do a really good job at being proactive in all aspects of our process. We do pull OFAC reports, but at the end of the day, that's just us trying to be a little more proactive and saying, okay, we're gonna have a problem with this or we not. But again, it's ultimately a process that's done within the bank. So I know it's pretty scary, but we're here to educate you and let you know of expectations and let you know what may or may not happen. Is it something that happens? Yes. Is it something that's common? Not so common. Moving on to things to remember, and this is just a little checklist that you guys can take and keep handy and keep handy. Prepare your clients for closing and funding. Talk to them about the 3 steps that we just talked about right now. Best days to close, and I think Genesis can agree with me on this, are Tuesdays and Thursdays. Reasons is Fridays, depending on when we're getting the package. Guess what? You may get your keys, you may not get your keys. And it would be very disappointing for your buyer if their package was sent to us later on in the day and their file isn't funding until Monday. So try to project your closings between the days of Tuesdays and Thursdays. Prepare them for late closing fundings and wire cutoff delays. We already talked about that. Original HOA approvals and documents must be turned in to us prior to the funding. We cannot just accept a copy. We can accept a copy as confirmation that the HOA has approved the borrower, but we need original documents. Remember, it's step 1 of the funding process. We need all of the documents in our hands in order for us to continue the funding process, okay? HOA approvals must match names on the contract. This is nothing more than a tip. However and whoever you have on your contract must be approved by the HOA. So if you have 3 sellers, all 3 sellers need to be mentioned on the HOA approval. Everything has to be streamlined. Everything has to be, it has to match. Everything has to be even. Always verify with the lender and title company parties that must be present at closing. It's just gonna go down to this one. If you're married, your spouses must be married. If you are separated, I am so sorry to tell you, there is no such thing as legal separation in Florida. Maybe in Texas, maybe in California, but not in Florida. If you are separated and you are still married, you are married. Hence, your spouse will have to come to closing and sign the documents alongside with you. So keep that in mind. Please let the customers know, let them keep that in mind. Because I don't know why everybody thinks that separation is like illegal. It's a legal thing. It's not. I'll mention title holders and sellers must sign off on the deed. This means that if I have 3 sellers on my deed, guess what? 3 sellers have to sign. If only 2 are living, we have to take it to probate. So keep that in mind. All mentioned title holders and sellers must sign off on this deed. Seller proceeds will be dispersed to the appropriate bank account. And Genesis can chime in on this one. Typically, if we have 2 sellers and they're a married party, we can typically disperse their funds into their joint account. If there are 2 sellers and they're single and they don't have a joint account, we will need some type of authorization saying, hey, you know, a portion of the sale proceeds needs to go to this account, a portion of the sales proceeds needs to go to that account. That's just paper trail, money trail, making sure that we are dispersing accordingly. So if you do have a seller that, or there's multiple sellers on a property, this might be something that you want to talk to them about and make sure that they have their banking in order.
Maylene, I also want to point out that if the seller is not necessarily an individual, but if the seller is a company, whoever's on title, that's where the money needs to go to. It cannot go to the managing members of that company. So if it's an LLC, it needs to go, the proceeds need to go to that LLC. If it's a trust, it needs to go to the trust. If it's an estate, it needs to go to an estate. What I've seen as far as if there's two sellers and one wants all the money to go to the other account, most of the times the underwriter doesn't allow that, but they will allow, like Maylene said, a disbursement authorization. Sometimes they'll agree to $1,000 minimum to one person and the rest to the other, so long they sign and get notarized that disbursement agreement.
Perfect. And then we have a question from Dina and Reuven. How does it work if our buyer is buying a rented condo? When do you need to see the rental agreement so you can prorate money owed to the buyer from the seller? Well, we would need to see that rental agreement as soon as possible. You would also want to make sure that on the contract, you have anything stipulated on there that they will do prorated monies. If it's cash deal, it should be an easy thing to do. It shouldn't be an issue. If it's a financing deal, you would want to take this back to the lender to make sure that they can allocate the prorated monies in their closing costs, because it would be part of the HUD if there is financing. And remember, the lender has to approve the HUD just as much as we have to approve it. So the sooner you have the rental agreement, the sooner it's presented to us as a title company, the better, because we can already start allocating those prorated agreements or those prorated amounts onto the closing disclosure and let the buyer and let the lender know. Any questions that you may have for us, please let us know. You have Genesis and myself here. Just a little tip and just a little reminder of who selects the title insurance policy is who pays for the title insurance policy is whoever selects to pay for it. So this goes back to the three provisions on the contract where you have seller, buyer, and Miami-Dade provision. Seller, if you select seller, seller will pay the policy, meaning that they will hire the closing agent. If you select buyer or Miami-Dade Broward, usually the buyer will pay for the title insurance policy and select the closing agent. So that's a little tip that you have there, so you can also calculate closing costs and you would know who to talk to when it comes to closing costs. Other than that, are there any other questions that we can answer for you at this time? Because we are finished. We covered a lot in about an hour. I think less than an hour.
Yeah, you did great.
Always.
Any other questions, guys? Please either unmute yourself or chat. I did have one, Maylene. They were asking for a copy of the slides also for this presentation too.
Yeah, I'll email them to you so you can have it and you can send it out.
Okay. And just everyone who registered for the class, I do have your email, so I'll go ahead and forward it to you once I receive it.
You're welcome, guys. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Anything you need, you have Genesis. My information's on the screen. You could call me as well. And we're here to help you. So any questions you have, we're here for you. Thank you, David. I appreciate that.
Okay. I guess we don't have any other further questions. Thank you guys for attending.
If you can do
Thank you, everybody.
Genesis, I still haven't seen you, by the way.
I'm on my desktop, so it doesn't have a video camera.
She's like that unlockable character in video games, you know? She's
An unlockable character on video games. That's funny.
Okay.
All right, guys. I'm logging off. I will see y'all later.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.